Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. It is Friday, day one of GearFest 2015, and we have a special guest joining us, DJ Ashba.
Yeah, I'm your assistant.
Yeah, you're my assistant. Yeah. More like the other way around, right? I'm just going to follow you around, carry your guitar for you.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. So, lead guitar, Guns N' Roses.
Yep.
Co-founder, lead guitar, 6 a.m.
Yep.
You're a busy guy.
Yep.
Serial entrepreneur.
Yes.
Lots of stuff going on.
I love to create.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. You're an Indiana boy.
I am. I was born in Monticello.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Nice.
it's awesome. I mean, this is cool to be a part of GearFest, Sweetwater, and what they're doing.
Pretty crazy, isn't it? The
Yeah.
number of people that are here and all the stuff
Yeah,
that's
I
going
was
on.
surprised. I was like, I didn't know anybody came out here in Indiana. I was
Yeah.
like, holy crap.
They come from all over the world.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's insane.
Pretty crazy. So you're going to be doing a workshop seminar, you're going to be doing some playing, showing your signature Les Paul.
Yes, which I'm really happy about. Have you seen it?
I've seen pictures of it. I haven't actually seen it in person.
It's sick.
Can't
It
just check it
sounds
out.
great, plays great,
Nice.
feels great, yeah.
Nice.
So
You mentioned you like to be creative. I read somewhere that you had your first cartoon published in the newspaper at age 4. Is that right?
I had it, not at age 4, but I had a cartoon. I was in 7th grade,
Okay.
and the local newspaper, I worked just in the back folding papers.
Right.
And I remember walking down this long hallway and knocking on the boss's, door and convincing him that, he needs a cartoon in his paper. And
Right. You got to be bold, though, right?
yeah, it was scary because he was a scary dude. So
Right.
but so I mean, I went from folding papers to my own office, and
Wow.
it was pretty cool.
That's pretty crazy. Crazy. And you started music very young, also.
Yeah, I started music when I was on the piano when I was 3 years old, and my mom was a classical piano teacher, and just loved music. It's all I really have ever known. So
Right. So when did you make the change from piano to guitar?
when I was 9.
You got a job, right?
Yeah, well, I detasseled corn all summer to finally buy my first guitar out of a Sears catalog.
Right. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I remember looking at the Sears catalog going, I want that one. It's got
Yeah,
the most knobs, right?
yeah. No, I got the White Flying V as a harmony, I remember.
Oh, wow.
And I got it because I was a big Randy Rhoads fan, and I was
Sure.
like, so
Sure.
it's pretty cool.
So you were in Illinois, correct?
Yes, I was in Illinois at the time, and I kind of went back and forth from Illinois and Indiana because my dad's side of the family lives in Indiana, my mom's side.
Got it.
So my whole life back and forth.
Right. Were you doing a lot of playing around the area at that time?
Yeah, I joined, the local band, and I joined the school band and jazz band and pep band and all that, but I was really horrible back then.
But you got to start, right? You
Yeah,
have to
exactly.
learn your way around. Right?
Yeah.
So you packed up, age 18, headed to Hollywood.
Yes.
Said, I'm going to be a rock star.
Yes.
Nice. So what happens when you arrive there?
When I arrived there, I realized, that this is going to be a really difficult, long road.
Right.
But I was in for the long haul. And I remember, I went out to visit first, and I'd never been out of really Illinois and Indiana. And remember flying over LA, and I couldn't get over it. Like the city just never ended.
Right.
I remember looking down going, all right, this is going to be a little more work to make a name out of all those people down there. And, and then I go, well, wait a second, I got to make a name in the whole world. So it's like one of those things where it's kind of a reality check, and you realize the dedication it's going to take. And,
Right.
So.
Right. Now, how long was it between when you arrived and you started landing gigs with people like Bullet Boys and stuff like that?
Well, I joined a band immediately. They were called Barracuda, and they were a cover band, but at the time, they had moved out from Chicago, and back home, they had like one song that hit MTV at the time, and they were this local Chicago band that had a record deal, and they did okay, and then they all ended up out there. And their band quickly turned to a cover band because nobody, whatever reason. And I lived in a big band house with them, and I only knew the drummer Vince, and he's the guy. I flew out one way, and he drove my little minivan out with me to LA.
All right.
And we went on tour and played tons and tons of bars, and for a couple years, and just getting a name around town as being a guitar player, and and met different people, and ended up somehow in the Bullet Boys.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
did you tour with them? Were you recording with
Yeah,
them?
I was never a member. What happened is I was good friends with Lonnie, and they their guitar player at the time couldn't do this tour, so I basically filled in for like a 3-week tour is all I did. But everybody to this day says, you were in Bullet Boys. I'm like, not really, but but it was a fun, you know, time. And Bullet Boys, it was Bullet Boys and Bang Tango, and that's where I met Joe Lestay. And then that's how we created Beautiful Creatures.
Right. Which an interesting thing about that band is you guys had pretty good success with placing songs into movies and stuff, didn't you? How did that come about? How were you able to place those songs?
Warner Brothers, we were on Warner Brothers and Warner Chappell Publishing, and so, you know, a lot of Warner Brother movies that come out, they like to use their artists, you know, so we were, you know, in Rollerball and Valentine and a bunch of movies, you know, so.
Right, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's good.
Nice
it's fun
exposure on that
fun
stuff.
to see your songs in that, you know. But our first real show out was opening up for Kiss in Detroit. So
no pressure.
Yeah, and I remember going to the gig, and we still didn't have a band name. And Warner Brothers was like, "Listen, we need a band name. This is holding up your record." And me and Joe, we were just like, "I have no idea." And he's like, "Pick a name," and I'll pick a name. And he's like, "Hell," and I said, "Star," or no, it was Ego Star was, I think, the name we played the first show with Kiss. And we made it up as we were pulling into the venue because we had no name. And I think we played that first show as Ego Star. And then after that, we Warner Brothers was getting really pissed off, and they're like, "We need a name because your album is not going to come out." And I remember they held a big meeting, a dinner meeting, and we had to walk in with a name or the album was getting pushed back. And me and Joe still had nothing. And we were walking up the sidewalk, and there's a restaurant, and somebody handed us a business card, and it said da-da-da-da-da, whatever, and it said Beautiful Creatures on it. We're like, we walked in, we're like, yeah, we got the name. You know? And that's how we got the name to that band, like, you know, and it actually was probably the coolest name ever, you know, but unfortunately it wasn't our idea, really.
Right. Now, is this around the same time when you did your first solo album, the instrumental album?
Oh, God, I did the solo album first. I did the solo album.
It's Addiction to the Friction, right?
Yeah, Addiction to the Friction. I did that after the Barracuda thing, kind of in the middle of that. I was doing construction, and I used to build houses back home, so, you know, obviously the cover band isn't going to cover my bills, so I got a job, and I was doing little 4-track demos back then on Tascam Porta 1 or whatever it was, and I remember, you know, I'd like to play my boss all the stuff I was working on, and, you know, we were building something for somebody. Well, that somebody came down and heard my demo and said, "Hey, I'm starting up a record label," and that's how that album came out. I was like his only artist, and then he closed doors down.
But you got a solo album.
Yeah. And then, you know, and then I'm not sure where it went from there, but you know, I think the Bullet Boys thing came up, and then Bang Tango, I met him, and we started Beautiful Creatures, and then I started doing kind of a solo thing on my own, and that was tough to get off the ground. And then I was signing a deal with Atlantic Records with a band called Operator, and Nikki Sixx called me, and I remember I was at a car wash, and he's like, "Hey, do you mind if I come down and hang out with you at rehearsal?" I'm like, I didn't even know he knew who I was, really, you know. And he had called me years back during that time to join Brides of Destruction. And at the time, I was so determined to, you know, make it on my own with my own band, and, you know, because I did it with Beautiful Creatures, and I wanted to, you know, do something else. And at the time when Warner Brothers dropped Beautiful Creatures, they offered me my own record deal, and I turned them down. I was like, I don't know, because, you know, this was my band, you know, this was my, so I took it real personal and turned that down, and then turned Nikki down, and he won't let me forget it to this day. But the timing just wasn't right in my head, you know, and then years later, of course, you know, we started 6 a.m.
Right, which I read somewhere that Motley Crue was one of the first concerts you ever went to, so that had to be a pretty crazy thing.
It was, yeah. When I was 16, my dad took me to the concert, and I just remember, you know, I remember watching him and going, it no longer was a dream. That was untouchable. I was like, okay, they're just normal dudes that are on a stage. And, I never was real starstruck. I never had that bone in my body. But what it did is it made it, that dream in my head, it made it touchable, because back then there was no internet, back in the old days. Or cell phones. But, so all we really had, and I grew up in a very religious family without TVs, so the only real, thing I had was, my mom's Elvis collection, or, if I'd sneak off to a buddy's to watch MTV. But that's really all the exposure I had of rock and roll.
Right.
And I was very sheltered in a very religious family. So when I did go and see him live, I was like, oh, wow, this dream isn't really that untouchable. Like, it can be done. And it made it very touchable in my eyes for some reason, like,
Right.
And I just remember that night kind of changed my life as far as this is definitely what I'm going to do for a living.
Right,
So
right.
I just didn't know to what extent.
Right, where you're going to land with that. Yeah. So you connected with Nikki Sixx, and the Heroin Diaries soundtrack came out. And,
that was all an accident too, I mean, originally Nikki invited me at the rehearsal. He invited me up to his house, and I thought, oh, this is kind of strange, weird, whatever. And I said, yeah, went up to his house, and there's an acoustic in his grand piano, and we sat down and wrote 4 songs. And within like an hour, and we were like, wow, we really have something cool here. There was like this magic chemistry thing. And he convinced me to team up with him. He had a studio called Funny Farm Studios, to team up with him as songwriting partners. And our goal was to produce and write songs for other artists. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I blew off my Atlantic Records deal.
Wow.
Second big major label, sorry. So I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but
it's worked out okay.
Yeah. But I have to go where my heart is, and I knew what me and Nikki were doing was very unique and magical. So we produced songs, for different bands like Drowning Pool and different things, and eventually co-produced the Saints of Los Angeles album and things like that. But over time, he would go out on tours, these long tours, and I would just finally had a studio at my fingertips, and I would just write and record. He'd come back in town, and we'd write, and and I think we had we still have 50 some songs that no one's ever heard that we've written, but from those days even. And but that's when I realized I had a real love for scoring, and he had all these programs, and I'd never tried to write a violin part before. So he would come in and kind of test me. He'd bring in the Elephant Man and stuff, and I'm very into Tim Burton and Danny Elfman and John Williams and people like that. And it was just kind of a test, like, hey, can you write something like this? And I'd tinker around the studio and pull up this and pull up that, and I'd be beating on like empty CD cases and tables and doing Foley sounds, and I got way into it, and that's when I wrote like Xmas in Hell and Intermission and Life After Death and things like that. And then he would come in off tour and be like, oh, we should narrate over this part and do this, and so basically I was basically scoring a movie that was inside of our heads with that. There's a whole almost unwritten script and a very vivid picture that was in our heads when we were scoring that record. So.
Right. And since then, you guys have done 5 albums, 6 albums?
I don't even know. We did, I think this is our 3rd studio album, but we put out 5 albums total.
Right. And you just came back from a big tour as well.
Yeah. I can't even remember. I'm getting old. So we are working on our brand new record right now, which is really exciting. So.
Right. So as if that doesn't keep you busy enough, you're also in Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Doing lead guitar there.
Yeah.
How did you make that connection? How did that come about?
Well, I mean, I was on the only real tour 6 a.m. had ever done. Like I said, it was a complete fluke and accident that 6 a.m. is a band, because, originally we just wrote the Heroin Diaries for fun to bring his book to life musically. And, I remember the label sent out a song called Life is Beautiful, and it just caught like wildfire. All the radio stations, you know, every station's phones were lighting up, and it's like, you know, I remember management calling and going, you know, your song just went #1, and we're like, what? You know, we had no idea. We didn't think well, in fact, Target said they would never carry it because of the name of it. They said, you either change the name from Heroin Diaries or we're not carrying it. And we're like, well, then don't carry it, because this album wasn't written for Target. It was written for us, you know. And and then they realized it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't pro-heroin. It was actually the opposite. It really spread a great message, and they finally understood what we were trying to do. But and then they carried it, of course. And I think in aisle 3 or 4, they actually sold heroin after that.
You get anything at Target, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think they have that at Target in Fort Wayne.
Yeah, hey, Johnny, go pick up a bag of heroin. But so that was cool, and it went #1, and I remember management calling and saying, you guys are now a band. And, you know, same thing. We don't have a band name, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I called up Sixx one day, and I go, I got the name, you know, and I go, Sixx Ashba Michaels. I go, no, I said 6 a.m. He goes, what, like the letter 6? I go, no, like your last name, it's like means Sixx Ashba Michaels. You know, it's like, you know, the colons and, you know, and he's like, that's awesome. So we kind of just ran with that, but, yeah.
Awesome. Right. And so then the connection to Guns N' Roses came how from that?
Yeah, I got off of GearFest, and I got a call from Guns manager, who was also personally managing me at the time, Katie McNeil. And she said, hey, you know, on the down low, Guns is looking for a guitar player. They've been, you know, auditioning like 100 and some guitar players, and would you want to come down and check it out? I was like, yeah, you know, but I never thought much of it. I really didn't give it a lot of thought. I was like, yeah, of course, I love Guns and whatever, and you know, and I just, if nothing else, wanted to go down and just say hey to everybody. You know, I had met Axl years ago. Sharon Osbourne introduced me to him when we were recording the Beautiful Creatures record, because he was in the next studio doing Chinese back then. And it's like, yeah, it'd be cool to say hi to Axl. He's from Indiana. I'm from Indiana, you know. And I went down, and I guess Axl caught wind of it, and I had no idea really he even knew anything about me, but evidently he really follows music in general. He knows a lot about everything that's going on. And he's, you know, called management, said if he even shows up, he has a gig. So it's like, it was just one of those fluke things where, you know, just the, you know, the stars were aligned. And
yeah. That's 5 years? 5 years
ago? Almost 6 now. Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah. So you're in 6 a.m., you know, you're the guitar player. There's 3 guitar players in Guns N' Roses, and you're playing, obviously, classic material and some newer kinds of things. How do you split up the duties in there? Because Ron Thal's also doing some guitar.
No, it's real easy because we all 3 have such different styles, you know. So Ron is a, you know, real, just incredible shredder guy, and you know, Richard is obviously amazing, plays anything, and I just like to drink, so.
So it works out perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
It's fun.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's never an ego thing. It's like, yeah, do you want this part? Yeah, take that. And whatever. I mean, we really don't.
And there's plenty for everybody to play.
Yeah, and it's just, we have a blast doing it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of work out of, you have a home studio.
I do,
right?
yeah.
And, I was interested to read that you're a big digital guy, and you're a big in-the-box kind of a guy.
All in the box.
Having worked in, you know, traditional studios, if you will, what is appealing to you about the in-the-box side of the production?
I don't have to cut 2-inch tape. No. You know, it's one of those things where over time it is, I mean, it used to sound very digital. Now it's to a point where they just really have come so far in that world, and you know, the computers, the processing speed, everything about that world has, you know, even the samples and things really sound like there's a real violin in the next room. You can hear this, you know, just the resin on the bow. It's like, it's really incredible. And, you know, it's literally, you know, so much easier. You don't have to go mic down this or mic down that for certain things, you know, like when I'm scoring, it's like I play everything on the keyboard. So, you know, and probably that's why, because I fell in love with scoring. there's nothing like having it all right at your fingertips, and when you're in the writing mode and you demo it all out, and then when you actually take it in and see the sheet music being written out. And you know, like when I co-produced the Neil Diamond record, I wrote this little orchestra piece and finally got to hear a real orchestra play it back, and it was just like the best thing I'd ever heard, you know. And it really changed my life, and that's when I really fell in love with the whole scoring, you know, world.
Right, right. Are you doing final production in your home studio, all in the box, or are you taking it to other studios?
No, what I do is I usually, you know, in my studio, I redid the whole thing, and it's really set up for film scoring right now,
okay.
More than like band. Like we don't record live drums there or nothing like that, but everything's pretty much in the box at my studio. Anything, you know, outside of that, I take it to James's studio mainly, you know, and I have a couple other studios, but mainly, you know, James will do all the mixing. If we need to cut live drums, we'll do it there. You know, for 6 a.m., all I really do in my studio for every record is just cut guitars there, you know, and then James pretty much, you know, we do most of it at his studio because his is set up for that. Mine's just a fun little place.
Yeah, a great place to be creative.
Yes. It's definitely a creative box, basically like this room.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So speaking of being creative, you are a media maven, serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Build a Beanie,
Yes.
Ashba Clothing,
Yes.
Ashba Media,
Yep.
Ashba Enterprises. Is kind of the what takes you in all those directions?
You know, I don't know. I've always had that creative bone, and you know, my aunt and uncle invented the technology for aerosol cans. So you know, ever since I was young, they came out with a product when I was really young called Pam. It's like a butter spray.
Sure.
And I've always kind of grew up in that environment and, you know, thought outside of the box, and I was really taught that, you know, it's better to create your own job than to work a 9-to-5. So, you know, that's always been my mindset, and I just love creating, you know.
Yeah, lots of different directions.
Yeah.
And you've actually said that you feel that musicians should diversify.
Sure.
And that you should always have a backup plan, which is kind of counter to what a lot of people say. They say go all out, don't worry about it, but you suggest a backup plan.
I absolutely will always stand by that. You know, if you put all your eggs in one basket, you know, all you got to do is drop them and they're going to break. Every one of them will break. But, you know, the whole thing, and I've learned this from Nikki Sixx, it's like you set up buckets. You set up buckets, little incomes coming in there, and as a whole, that's how you know. And if this one over these 3 buckets aren't doing so good this month, well, these are, and so it's diversifying, and it's, you know. But if you put all your eggs in that one bucket, and you have 5 months of you know, oh God, things aren't going well, that could really, you know, spoil your eggs.
Yeah, right. Keep the metaphor going.
Yeah. So.
Right. Great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yes, thank you.
We're excited about the signature guitar.
Yeah.
It's got a Seymour Duncan pickups.
Yes.
It's got a kill switch on it, master volume in 2 tones, right?
And a compound radius neck,
right.
so you'll
really
never
cool
get
finish
a
also.
fret out on it.
Yeah, there
which
you go.
is good.
Right. Yeah, so I can't wait to check it out. And you're about to go on stage,
Yeah,
actually, and do some
gonna-
jamming, so we got to get you out the door.
Yeah.
But thanks again. I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear.